And until we bring it all together, what we call the jobs, growth, and sustainability triangle, unless all of those three things are being pushed, we will not have genuinely sustainable sustainability.
Dear friends, welcome to another edition of Forum 2000 Online Chat. Today, our guest is Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, a public policy professional, advisor, author, columnist, and institution builder. As the founder, CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water since 2010, under his guidance, CEEW has become one of Asia's leading policy research institutions and is among the world's 20 best climate think tanks in 2013 and 2016. Dr. Ghosh previously worked at Princeton, Oxford, UNDP, and WTO. Dr. Ghosh is also is author of several books and has worked in some 45 countries. His tireless work and contributions in the field got him the nomination by the UN Secretary General to the UN's Committee for Development Policy in 2018. Since 2020, Dr. Ghosh serves as the co-chair of the Energy, Environment, and Climate Change track for India's Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy. He is co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Councils on Clean Air and is a member of the International High-Level Panel of the Environment of Peace Initiative. Dr. Ghosh, welcome once again.
Thank you, Arzu.
So my first question is about the work that is being carried by the CEEW, the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water. It's one of Asia's leading non-for-profit policy research institutions. Can you briefly tell us what's the scope of your work at CEEW and your role there?
Well, thanks for having me on this interview, Arzu. It's a real pleasure to be interacting with you and with the wider audience of Forum 2000. My organization, CEEW, serves as an independent think tank. We were formed a little over 10 years ago to try and integrate issues of energy, water, climate change, local environmental issues, but integrate them into the broader kind of development discourse for India, but also for other developing countries and emerging economies. So what do? We pride ourselves on our data, and in a lot of areas, we focus a lot on getting granular, up-to-date primary data, sometimes more data than even the government has, because we send out armies of researchers across the country. So we use that data, whether it's on energy access, whether it's on water, whether it's on industrial emissions, on jobs being created, and then we integrate it into our analysis and then have strategic outreach to inform the discourse, to advise policymakers, and to make sure that we are approaching sustainability not because it's morally right, but because it also makes economic sense and that it is socially just. And until we bring it all together, what we call the jobs, growth, and sustainability triangle, unless all of those three things are being pushed, we will not have genuinely sustainable sustainability. So that's really what we do. We've worked on India's big renewable energy targets. It's one of the largest renewable energy countries in the world. We've advised on the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons in India and across the world. We have supported the creation of the International Solar Alliance, the world's newest intergovernmental entity. We are creating a climate risk atlas for India, the first of its kind anywhere in the developing world. We have a Center for Energy Finance that develops financial products that can reduce the risks associated with investment in clean energy in India and in other emerging markets. We look over the horizon at technologies and what are the emerging technologies that matter for the development and sustainability of developing countries. So we looked at energy storage and batteries, of electric mobility, and most recently on green hydrogen. And we've been working on supporting the Indian government in announcing the latest national hydrogen energy mission. So on a range of issues, from agricultural sustainability, water sustainability, energy transition, our job is to take our data, our analysis, and our strategic outreach, to explain and change the use, reuse, and misuse of resources.
That sounds like a lot of work, but also a lot of incredible work. Good luck with all the projects. And it also resonates with what you mentioned at your TED Talk, how it's not just one institution that's responsible for change. It's all the different parts of a society. And I think that goes to what you were saying and all the different areas that you're trying to work and engage with. So that's really incredible. So my next question is actually about the role of India and its place as, a country that's at the heart of climate change conversations right now. There was a recent briefing by the European Parliament where India is mentioned as one of the countries at the core of climate change and its impact, from extreme weather to air pollution, poverty, as it is very much the core of issues like air pollution, deforestation, and many other issues. And the government has taken steps in addressing many of these challenges. What has been the success rate of government's policies, and how much of a role does CEEW play in helping relevant stakeholders like the government institutions and others to address these global environmental issues?
So Arzu, first of all, we have to recognize that what you said at the outset, it's absolutely critical that India is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Our analysis at CEEW suggests that 3/4 of our districts, we have more than 700 districts across the country, 3/4 of our districts are now hotspots for extreme climate events, whether it's a drought, a flood, a cyclonic event, and so forth. Now, that obviously means that we cannot treat climate change only as a pastime environmental issue. It is front and center in how we design our development policy, what kind of jobs we create, what kind of industries we create, and how we power up those industries. So it's in that regard that we have to analyze and evaluate how effective government interventions have been. If I look at some of the big success stories, I would count the renewable energy story and the energy efficiency story very much at the front and center of that effort. Take an example. A decade ago, we had less than 20 megawatts of solar power in the country. Today, we have more than 92,000 megawatts of solar and wind, with a target of 450,000 megawatts of renewable energy by 2030. And CEEW was instrumental in evaluating our national solar mission, in advising government on how to scale up the targets, and in looking at what would be the investment strategy year on year to be able to draw in the billions of dollars of investment that is needed to achieve these targets. Similarly, if you take energy efficiency, India, about 9 years ago, kickstarted a program on a trading scheme on energy efficiency for the largest industries in the country, called the Perform, Achieve, and Trade scheme. Because of that and several other energy efficiency schemes, for instance, it deployed hundreds of millions of LED light bulbs across the country and brought down the prices of LED light bulbs from more than 300 rupees to less than 50 rupees, less than $1. So what that does is at a mass scale, it changes the way you're lighting up a room. So energy efficiency and renewables have had a big role, but what more needs to happen? As India looks out into the future, a few key areas will continue to require attention. Number one is the efficiency at the household level. India has done outstandingly well in connecting nearly every household in the country with electricity now. About 700 million people have got access to electricity in the last 2 decades. But the household energy efficiency will matter in terms of the overall country's energy. Second will be our industrial sector. We have one of the world's largest industrial bases, but how do we make steel, cement, fertilizer, petrochemicals in a less energy consuming fashion? So industrial decarbonization will be another area that will require work, and which is where the recently announced hydrogen energy mission becomes important. And the third area which will be critical is transportation. And again, that's where India has put out big targets for about 30% of all new vehicles being sold in 2030 to be electric. and all two-wheelers and all three-wheelers to be electric. Our estimation at CEEW suggests that that would be a $206 billion opportunity. And finally, the fourth area would be making the rural economy, where some of the poorest people reside, also sustainable. And again, our work on what we call powering livelihoods shows that using distributed clean energy in productive activities in the rural economy is a $50 billion opportunity. So we should celebrate the work that has happened in India in renewables. We should celebrate the work that has happened in energy efficiency. But as we look out into the future, we should continue with household energy efficiency, industrial energy and decarbonization, the transport decarbonization, and the sustainability of the rural economy. If we get these fundamental building blocks right, we're onto a very different pathway of development.
That sounds like a very busy work plan. What is your estimate of like what does the time frame looks like for all these different directions and projects that are currently being discussed?
It would vary from one thing to another. So the household energy efficiency should be yesterday. So every time a new household gets connected to the grid, it should be using more and more efficient appliances. And India has again done, as I said, on LEDs, but there are now standards, so what are called star ratings for appliances like air conditioners and refrigerators. But we are now pushing very strongly for star-rated energy efficiency, star-rated fans, and other smaller electrical appliances that poorer houses also use. The industrial decarbonization story will maybe pan out over the next 2 or 2.5 decades, because that will require that kind of time. Transportation, as I said, there are already very big targets for 2030, and it can rapidly unfold the more we set up the manufacturing capacity at home for, say, batteries and the powertrains for electric vehicles. And again, finally, the rural economy. Again, this is, a decade and a half ago, a professor had talked about the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, this is the bottom of the pyramid that can also be resilient, climate friendly, and jobs and income generating. If we only knew how to use the cleanest sources of energy to drive up these productive enterprises. So once we identify and recognize that, you can get 500,000 jobs from renewable energy, you can get 200,000 jobs in servicing air conditioners, efficient air conditioners. You can get 1.9 million jobs in the hydrogen supply chain. Once you start recognizing that it's not just an environmental story, it's a job story, it's an investment story, the pace that you're referring to can simply be accelerated, because then it is no longer in the margins of the public consciousness, it's in the mainstream of government and industry action.
Oh, this is really interesting, because now I'm thinking, all of what you're describing and all of the plans that are currently being discussed and planned for the future also requires interest and demand on behalf of the people, right? And so I guess my next question is, it's kind of twofold. First is, what kind of change have you observed in recent years, especially in particular with regard to this issue, from the people themselves? Is there interest to become more responsible? Is there interest to educate themselves? I mean, you, again, like going back to your TED Talk, you talk a lot about this, people perspective, how much work also falls on the shoulders of the individuals themselves. And my second question on that is, what kind of role you think the youth can play? I mean, judging from the population, and youth constitutes a majority of population in India, and what has been their interest? What kind of solutions they're coming up with? Are they? Do you have this kind of ongoing partnership with, eco clubs and these kind of initiatives? What can you tell us about that?
So let me answer both those questions in the order you've posed them, Arzu. The role of people is absolutely critical. At CEEW, we call it the 4 legs of the stool. There's technology, there is finance, there is government policy, but the 4th leg is behavioral change, right? Mm-hmm. And you will not get the effectiveness of the other 3 efforts without behavioral change happening at the people end. Now, what will drive that change? And what we observe is that the best changes, or the most revolutionary changes, happen when there is a convergence of the interests of the elite and the interests of the climate vulnerable. If you take renewables, it's big money, big investment. And therefore you can't do it, if you were just a small scale entrepreneur. But at the same time, if it services the needs of the poorest, not just the needs of the richest, then you begin to create that bottom-up demand for clean energy. Now, how does that happen? Before before electricity or clean electricity, many rural households in India or elsewhere in the developing world would use very polluting kerosene to light up their lamps in their villages. And that's polluting, it's bad for your health. And then I have gone across villages in India where very poor farmers have deployed solar panels on their roofs because they say, I don't want this kerosene fume in my room, in my house. Right? Just 3 months ago, we kicked off another campaign with neighborhoods in Delhi, where our office is, in both affluent neighborhoods and in poorer neighborhoods, to create a bottom-up demand. We call the campaign Solarize, the demand for putting up rooftop solar, by demonstrating to them that if they did that, their electricity bills would come down, more local jobs would get created, and so forth. Similarly, you mentioned my TED Talk. And what I've laid out, the mission 80-80-80, that in 2027, when we are going to be an 80-year-old independent nation, can we reduce air pollution by 80% in 80 cities across the country? Now, again, that will require the role of not just governments, but the role of residents and citizens. So we are working with resident welfare associations in different localities and helping them understand that air quality data and helping them create that demand. So on issue after issue, when you demonstrate that there are jobs there, when you demonstrate that there's that they and their children can have a better quality of life, or you demonstrate that there's a lot of new investment and growth for the big capitalists, then you bring that convergence of the climate vulnerable and the elite together. But then if you take the question of the youth, that's absolutely critical, not just because it sounds nice to say that. India is a young country. It's an ancient civilization, but a young country. More than 60% of our population is under the age of 25. And that's why we are a 10-year-old organization. I am 10 years older than since I first founded it, but our median age continues to remain under 30 at CEEW. And we are a team of more than 100 people. And why? Because you can't solve for the problems of the future by having the people of the past working on it. You have to solve it with the people who have the energy, the brains, the technology, and the willingness to bet their lives and their careers on making their own quality of life, their own country, and their own planet more sustainable. So it's not just a question of youth activism or youth kind of enthusiasm to clean up the planet by walking out on the streets. Yes, youth across the world have that energy. But what we want to do is channel that energy into development of new business models, development of new financial models, development of new technologies, deploying the youth within the communities where they can work with the communities to test out these solutions. Only then will the youth feel that they are not just demanding change, but they are actually actioning the change they are demanding. Gandhi, famously said, be the change you want to see. And leveraging the youth, the demographic dividend that India has and the demographic dividend that an organization like CEEW has is very much in pursuit of the same Gandhian principle.
Well, I think this is a beautiful summary and a wonderful ending to this interview, which has been extremely informative. I'm grateful for your time and for all the knowledge and information that you shared with us, with Forum 2000 audience. It's been incredible to listen to, and I wish we could just go on and continue talking about the projects and the work that you do and the outreach, because there's so many things to discuss, right? The challenges also as an organization, but also all the other circumstances that lead us humans to do the work that we do. So, once again, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you offline, maybe at a Forum 2000 sometime when it happens in an actual physical world.
Definitely, Arzu. I hope that'll happen as well. But let me close by commenting on both our names. So yes. My name, Arunabha, in Sanskrit, means the first rays of the rising sun. So it's as if my parents willed for me to work on clean energy and solar. But your name means hope and wish. And, if we can put our energies together, our names together, then we can hope for a cleaner, more sustainable planet and, a just world for the people. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. That's an excellent, that's an excellent wish. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.